Okay, all right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. We are here. This is the last session of our Knowledge Days for 2021. So let's go ahead and dive right in. We've got a lot to talk about. And we're here today. We're discussing kind of the fundamentals of sets and jobs, managing the sets, running jobs against them, what we can do with this functionality in Alma. So my name is Amanda Schriver. I'm a premium services consultant. As you know, I'm being supported by Yaala Ariel-Joel, who is a technical support analyst. I'm sure many of you are familiar and have worked with Yaala in support. Okay, so here's a glimpse of what we're going to talk about today. First, we're just going to go into an introduction about sets, and then we'll kind of work our way through talking about creating, editing, manipulating sets, and then running jobs on them. So let's go ahead and jump into some information on sets. So what are search queries and sets? So a set is a group of entities that have something in common. Maybe they're items that are all in a specific location, or maybe it's a group of items that need to be marked as missing. So they all have something in common. Sets can be used to manage data directly. So you can view and edit your records one by one. I could go into my set members and edit each of them. And it saves them as a group so I can always go back and work on them again. We can, of course, also use sets to manage and update data in bulk, such as publishing a set of records or doing bulk item updates, work kind of like that. And there are two set types in Alma. So we have logical and itemized sets. So let's go ahead and talk about logical sets first. So a logical set, it's a saved search query, and every time you open that set, Alma is running the search again at that very moment in time. So it's dynamic. The set contents will update to reflect the current information in the repository, and that's regardless of the set type. So it could be a user set, a loan set, items, orders. Logical sets will always be running the query every time you open the set to see the members in it. So here, for example, we've got a little preview. We've got a set here for electronic portfolios from a specific collection. So in this case, we are looking for portfolios, maybe we're looking for things that were published before 2016. Maybe we're looking for a copyright period or something. So in this specific screenshot, actually, we're looking at portfolios in the eBook Central Public Library Collection Complete. And they are published the publication date is greater than 2020. So this is going to get me a set of portfolios with publication dates in 2021. And every time I open this set, if a portfolio has been added to this collection from a community zone auto update, for example, it's going to show up in my results then. Okay, so the other type of set we can have in Alma is called an itemized set. And this means that the members of that set, they're added by the user, and the contents of the set won't change unless I manually remove or add them to that set. So I could do this one by one from a repository search. I could add to the set from an analytics report. I can also use a file to populate an itemized set. So here's an example. We're looking at a screenshot of an analytics report. So this is a view for the most loaned items. So when I create this set, it's going to be populated with the data from analytics right at that moment. If something changes and maybe I get in a really popular book today and in the next week it becomes my most circulated title, the set isn't going to update because the set was using the information that was created at that time. So it's not like that logical set that will update itself every time I look at the members. So within our two different types of sets, logical and itemized, we also have different content types for sets. And by this, I mean I can have repository sets. So that would be inventory, bibliographic records, physical items, portfolios. But I can also have acquisition sets. So I could have a set of purchase order lines or a set of vendors. So keep in mind also, you can only create sets for the various areas of Alma you have access to. And so what I mean by that is I work in access services and I have circulation desk privileges. That doesn't mean that I can make a set of purchase order lines because I don't have those roles. So let's go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about managing sets. So to access your sets and sets that are in your institution's Alma, you will navigate to your Alma menu and then choose Admin and Manage Sets. And from there, you will see 3 tabs: My Sets, Public Sets, and All Sets. The All Sets tab is available only to a repository manager. And that role is also required in order to edit public sets. Then we have my sets. So those are sets that my user has created. Whether they're public or private, they will all be found under my sets. And then public sets, this tab contains all sets from all users in Alma that are public. And just to note, there's no limit on the number of records that can be included in a set or the number of sets you can create. All right. So now we've kind of covered those basics. Let's talk about when and why we might use sets in Alma for the work that we're doing. So a couple use cases here. We might have, the case of post-migration cleanup, right? Because we all migrated. And when you migrate to Alma, there's a process you're all familiar with, I'm sure, called P2E, or the physical to electronic process, that's going to create local portfolios in Alma at the time of migration. After go live, there's going to be some cleanup that you're going to want to do, and you can use sets to manage this. Specifically with these local PDE portfolios, you might want to move them to a local collection. It's a little bit easier to manage them when they're in a collection, so you might decide to go ahead and do that. Or maybe you just want to group them into a local collection so I could link them to the community zone. So 2 options there. You'll see throughout the presentation, we've included some helpful links to documentation and other resources. So these will be in the slides if you want to go download those. So another use case might be for some ongoing tasks I need to perform, such as updating my item statuses from missing to in place. Maybe I'm moving them from one location to another. I've rearranged the physical materials in my library, for instance. So that's one way I could also use a set. And I have here a knowledge article, and there's also wonderful bulk scan-in with an app that can make scanning in large sets much faster. So we can also, excuse me, create an authority set from the community zone. We could work with a set of users as well. Maybe I need to update expiry dates or purge information, maybe need to update user groups. There's a variety of ways we could use user sets as well. And then maybe if I work in acquisitions, I need to make some reporting code changes to my POLs. Maybe we added a few more reporting codes, and I want to go back and add them to some of my orders for reporting purposes. I can use a set to do that. Or I could use a set to switch a PO line type from physical to electronic. So that's actually something you can do now also with cloud apps. So this is something new if you aren't familiar with cloud apps. There are a lot of really great options right now. You can access them from within Alma, so there's no need to go generate an API key and program something yourself. You can do it all right within Alma. So I just included a bit of information here. The bulk scan-in cloud app is really great. Every time I go back and look and see what's been added to the cloud apps, there's something new and really useful there. So I encourage you all to take a look at that too. Okay. So Next up, we'll talk about creating and editing sets. So we'll talk about creating. So how do we create a set? One way to do this is from the Manage Sets page that we looked at before. So that's admin and then Manage Sets. And from there, I can choose to add a set and then choose whether I want to create an itemized or a logical set. So then from there, we can follow the menu as it prompts us to fill in some information. So we can add some details like the set name, a description if I wanted to add any kind of notes. Um, and then as part of this, one of the most important things here is going to actually be selecting your content type. Um, so you can select between whether it's a title search, an item, or excuse me, a title set and items, purchase order lines, etc. Just a quick note, make sure your set names don't contain special characters, Alma will give you an error. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at logical sets first. So if I'm adding a logical set, Alma's going to take me, once I select save and enter my information, Alma's going to take me to a screen where I can then begin a search. And once you've created your desired query, you can select save query up here, and that's going to save that search for you as a logical set. You can also always create a set based on a search you're already performing. So if I'm already in Alma searching for something and I realize I've just really gotten this great query and I want to save it because I know I'm going to need it again, right from that point, there will be a save query button that you can use to save that as a set. Once you've created it, Alma will give you this little notice here just to let you know that your set has been successfully saved. Okay, so for manage sets, I can also edit this set if I need to come back to update the criteria I use to create it, or maybe I need to add something more to it. You'll find the set you want from manage sets, and then we'll click results from the actions menu. So of course that's our three dots, or you can always right click to access that menu. Select results, and then when you get to your page, you'll click on that hyperlink text right here. And that's the original search query. So if you click on that, then you can add to it, you can remove, and you can make any kind of changes that you need to. Okay, so let's move to itemized sets. So from manage sets, again, going back here, if I select add a set and I create my itemized set, this is the screen that I will see. Of course, need to fill in that name and any other information, make those selections, whether it's private or public. And then I can choose how I want to create the set. I can use an analytics report. I can use a file, and I'll select it from my local machine. The file type that you need is going to be either Excel, a text file, a CSV, or again, from analytics. So once I've made that decision, I've selected my file and I've made sure everything looks good. I'll click save in the upper right-hand corner up here. Okay, so a note on the files. So I said text, CSV, Excel, right? The key to this is you really want to make sure you've got the correct header column that's required to create the set. So if I have an item set and I don't have the header that I need as documented in the online help, Alma's going to give me an error. So I want to make sure. So for instance, if I'm making a PO line set, I need to have a header that says PO line reference. And then under that is where I can have my purchase order lines. So this is what the error looks like if you do have the wrong kind of header. It's going to let you know that the input file is missing a column, and it's going to give you a heads up just about what those supported identifiers are. Okay, to go to an itemized set and work with the members from Manage Sets, I'm going to find that set. I'm going to go to my Actions menu, and then I'm going to select Members. And from there, I can update my set contents. I can add or remove members to the set as I need to. And also, another way that we can add members to a set, if I'm not using a file or an analytics report, I can manually one by one add members to a set. So when I'm creating that set, as we see here, we're back to this screen. Instead of selecting the file at the bottom here, I would select Add Members to Set. This is going to take me to a blank search page where I can search for my resources and add them to my set. Okay. All right, so let's move on. We're going to talk a little bit more about set manipulation. So actually manipulating our sets and the contents of them. And so some of the actions we can do, we can combine sets. We can convert a logical set to an itemized set, as we see in that screenshot here. You might do this if, for instance, you created a logical set based on a certain condition, but that condition might also be what you need to update in the set contents, right? So if I update that data piece that I built my set around and my set's logical, I'm not going to have any results in my set. So um, that's an instance where you might want to turn a logical set into an itemized set. When you select that from your actions menu, this itemize option over here, you'll see this screen and you can give your new output set a name and make some of these other selections here too. All right. We can also combine sets in Alma, as I mentioned. They do need to be the same type, so the same content type. So, I can't combine, for instance, a set of purchase order lines with a set of items. Alma won't let me do that. I can combine two item sets or two PO line sets, but they do need to be the same content type. Okay, so to combine sets from that action menu, here it is again, we're going to select Combine Sets. And we'll see this page, which we're, getting very familiar with as we've seen it a few times. We can give it a name. And down here at the bottom, we see a new section. And this is where I can make my selections for the set I want to combine it with, and then also the operation I want. So whether, I want to use and, not, or is the operator to create this. So and, of course, is going to include only the members in common between the two sets. Not, as an operator, will include members that are in the first set and not in the second set in the new combined set. Or is going to give me all of the members in both sets in the new combined set. So doing this when you combine the set, it's going to create a job. So Alma will first, of course, give you a confirmation message. Make sure that you know what you're doing, that you're combining these, and you give an opportunity to review what you've selected. So once we confirm, that job kicks off and it will result in an itemized set. Okay, so further than just combining sets, we can actually filter them as well. Um, And we use yes or no criteria to filter sets using what we call indication rules. These are really similar to normalization rules. Um, when we're filtering sets, it is relevant for resource management content type sets. Um, Best practice recommendations for this would be to use an indication rule for fields that aren't indexed or searchable. Um, because if it exists, when you're creating the set, it's much easier to just use it at that point than to maybe necessarily go back and filter it with an indication rule. Okay. Um, so to use an indication rule, filter the set, I'm again going to my set management page from manage sets. I'm right clicking or choosing my action menu and then selecting filter set. Next, you'll enter some information and choose a new name for your set, what you want that output to be. And then at the bottom of the page, you're going to select the indication rule that you've created. You create an indication rule the same way you create a normalization rule, as I said, and it is the same language, so it uses that rules. So as I said, they're really helpful when you need to make some slight adjustments to a set based on metadata elements that aren't indexed. An example that we have up here is maybe you want to go back and exclude government documents. So maybe you want to do that based on something in the 008 field or something like that. If you want to read some more about this, I've got a link here to the online help and then another page with some best practices and how-tos. Okay, so one last thing to point out is that you can create sets from your institution zone or the community zone. And also, if you are in an Alma network, so you're in a consortium that has a network zone, you can create network zone sets. So we can see here, if I'm part of a consortium and I'm looking at my sets from this manage sets page, we can select content origin. And that's where I can select whether I want to look at community zone sets, institution only sets, or network and institution sets. So for instance, maybe if I'm looking for a network set, I'm coming in because I need to maybe like manage some linked bib records that I have linked to the network zone. Maybe I need to add some um, local fields to that, for instance. Okay, and for community zone sets, this option, it's available for bibliographic and authority records. So an example of when you might want to do this would be to create a set and then use that push to metadata editor option. So you could send it to the metadata editor if you want to enhance those records. Or maybe with authorities, you want to create some local records if you're using local authorities and you want to kind of jumpstart that creation based on an existing authority record. Okay, so now we've reached the point where we can talk about running jobs on our sets of data. Okay, so where do we start? To run a job against a set, you're going to start from your Alma menu and you're going back to your admin option, and then you're going to select run a job from that menu. And you can find the job based on different criteria and the filters. So you can also search for it by description or name, but maybe you're not sure of that. You can always select the content type so you can narrow down your options and then find what you're looking for. And once you've identified the job that you want to run, you will click the radio button next to it, like we see here in this column, and then select Next in the top right corner. So here's my screenshot of that. just to give you an idea and highlight that little radio button there. And here is my next button in the top right. So once I've done that on my next screen, I'm then going to find the set that I've created. So important to keep in mind at this point, you're only going to see sets with the relevant content type. So if I'm running an acquisitions job, I'm not going to see a user set, for example. So if you get to this point and you've gone and you made your set, you're going to go run the job. If you don't see it here, it might be that you need to adjust the content type it was created with. Okay, on the next screen, you have the option to input some parameters and inspect the estimate for the set size. So just a good idea to have an idea of how many members you're going to be affecting with this when you submit it. And once you've entered your parameters, Alma is going to give you another screen to review it again. We want to make sure we've selected everything just as we want. It's all correct. And if you do find any mistakes, you know, maybe you clicked on the wrong thing or you accidentally selected something incorrect from the dropdown, you can use the back button to go to backtrack through that wizard so you can fix anything that you need to. Okay, so then after this, we've reviewed and confirmed everything looks good and we are 100% positive we are ready to run this job. Alma will kick off a job and you can track the progress of it by going to admin and then monitor jobs. And you can either look at the running tab or history. So if it's still running, maybe it's a big set. You can kind of track its progress as it's going. You can see when it starts, you know, how far through it's made it, and other information kind of that. So when the job finishes, you can come into this history tab that we see here, and you can then look at a job report. So from the actions menu, you can see we have an option for report and an option for events. Events, I will just say, probably more relevant if you're doing some troubleshooting, but a report is going to give you a good glimpse with counters and information about what changes were made in the job. So just looking at some other useful jobs that we have in Alma. Another one that's really helpful is actually export jobs. So you can, if you can't get that data extracted to Excel from like a search screen, if you export to Excel, you can use an export process to get those records out as well. Also to note are publishing jobs. So you can publish a set of records to OCLC, for example. You could be publishing a set of records for HoneyTrust, something like that. And Alma has some options for publishing profiles that coordinate to those options and publishing those sets. Another handy set is this update notify users job. There's a few different parameters in here that will be helpful as you're kind of managing things. I think I had talked earlier about, you know, updating expiration dates or purge dates. Maybe you need to send a notification directly to your user. You can do that with this update notify users job. Okay. Okay, so next I want to talk about using normalization rules as jobs. And there's a few ways we can do this. You can do normalization rules as jobs on holding records and on bibliographic records. I'm going to first talk just about holding records. So we'll say that in our use case here that we'll use, we're going to need to update our 852, the first indicator, to change the call number shelving indication. So obviously first, I'm going to want to make sure I have this normalization rule established already. I've written it in my metadata editor, and you can see over here in the new metadata editor, we have these options over here. You want to select rules, and then we can select normalization. So here's our rule for this use case when we're changing our indicator. So we're also going to want to make sure at this point that we are testing our normalization rule. We want to make sure it works. So what you want to do is when you're editing your holding record, you're going to want to go into split screen and then select the normalization rule you're working on. So if you're in the new metadata editor, I just added a little screenshot here of what this looks like because I think it's kind of a tiny button. And so I wanted to make sure everyone knew where it was. It slipped past me when I was, training myself on the new metadata editor. Okay, so when you've got, your record and your normalization rule up next to each other in the split screen, we're going to want to use this option here to preview. So we can preview the changes that we're making. And it won't necessarily actually save the update, but it allows you to really work with your normalization rule and make those edits and see what the results will be in real time. So once you click preview, this is the screen that you would see, and you can see in the right side here, we have our normalization rule preview, and we can see that our 852 here in the original record, that first indicator is 1. And when we preview and test our norm rule, we see that it has flipped it to 0. So our normalization rule here is working well. So next up, we will talk about how we actually use this normalization rule as a job. How can we do this? So what you will do is in Alma, and of course, you're going to need the correct roles to do this, so you might not see these options when you go in, but you'll go to the Alma configuration menu, then to resources, and select metadata configuration. From there, you'll click on the Mark 21 Holdings link at the top of the page. And then once you navigate there, you're going to click on the Normalization Processes tab. So that's what we have up here. In our Mark 21 holding profile, I'll select normalization process. And this process that I'm going to add is linked to the normalization rule. So I'm adding it and I'm selecting the normalization process I've already created. So this is what this looks like. We see marked rule normalization. And next up, we want to make sure we've got a set that we can use. So because we are working on a holdings record, we need to use the change holding information job. So we can double check in the online help. I know that my content type for this set needs to be a physical item. Oops, excuse me. So then I can just confirm here I have my set with my group of holdings records where I need to update that shelving indicator. I am good to go. I've got the right content type. Okay, so we've just created this set that I've created. It's a quick set. It's just got one member. We can always expand this if we need to. I've just created a really quick one in this example. So now I'm going to go through that run a job process again. I'm going to go to my Alma menu, select admin, and run a job. And then I'm going to find the change holding information job. I can, of course, search for it based on the description or the name, or I can always change my dropdown from my type here to information update. So that's the work I'm doing. I am updating information in my holdings record. So next, of course, I'm going to select that set again. Here's my single one for knowledge days. And then on the next screen, I'm going to fill in my parameters. So I've highlighted here the relevant section. In this change holding information job, what I want to do is check the box next to this option to correct the data using normalization rules. Then from this dropdown, I am going to select that normalization process that I created. So here's my rule to update the 852 for knowledge days. So again, we're double checking and we're confirming. Alma's going to give us a confirmation message, and we just want to make sure we've got everything right. We've selected the right set. The number of members looks correct, because it's always better to do things right the first time, to avoid those mistakes. And then we'll click next and the job will run. So again, we can see it as it's processing and running in this tab. And then we can go to the history tab and see when it completes a report on how that went. So in our instance, we have our job is completed. We see the total number of holdings records processed and the number of records changed. Okay, so I showed you this using an example for a holdings normalization rule. It's slightly different if we want to run a normalization rule against a bibliographic record. So I will quickly, I'm just going to pop into an Alma. Let's see where I am. Here we go. So I'm in this Alma environment, and what I'm going to show y'all is how I could do this if I wanted to add a normalization process for a bibliographic record. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to my configuration. From here, I'm selecting resources, and I'm going to be looking in this cataloging section of the menu. And I want to select metadata configuration. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see my screen. I just saw it pop up in chat. I'm so sorry. One sec. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, I am in Alma. Let me adjust the size of my screen here. Take it down a little bit. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm going to my configuration menu. I'm clicking on that gear in the bottom left corner, and then I'm clicking on resources, and then I'm going to metadata configuration. And from here, instead of choosing Mark 21 holding, like I just did, I'm going to choose Mark 21 bibliographic. And if Alma decides to open it, we will see what this looks like. We'll walk through just adding the process to the bibliographic profile. Okay, so here we are. I'm in my Mark 21 bib profile, and I'm clicking on normalization processes again. And what I'm going to do is select add process. And I will give this a name. And I'll give it a description. And I'll go ahead and set that status to active because I want to be able to use it. So I'll click next. I'm going to add a task. And from here, what I want to select is Mark Drool normalization. So I'll check the box next to that and then select add and close. And again, I'm going to select next in the top right to move to the next screen. And now what I'll do is I would be selecting from here the normalization process that I want to use. So this is the norm rule that I've created. And I will just use this one that's here that's deleting a 954 field from my bibliographic records. So once I've located and selected my normalization rule from the dropdown, I'm going to click Save. Now, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Alma menu, and I'm going to go again to Admin, and I'm going to select Run a Job. And the thing that's different when I do this as a bibliographic record normalization is that I'm actually creating a job with my normalization process. So we can see as we scroll through here, we're going to see some different ones. And here's the one I just created. So now all I have to do is check the box next to this and move through the screens as we would, as we saw before with the holdings, change holdings information. Okay. Okay. So here I am. Let's go ahead. Let's go to talk about restoring jobs. So I know we're all really savvy and we're really careful because Alma has made us review our selections as we're going through the process. Um, but sometimes things happen, right? Mistakes happen. We're human. And luckily, there are some cases where we can restore jobs in Alma. So to do this, you do need the role of repository manager, and you can restore jobs to withdraw items if you've deleted portfolios or bibliographic records. You can restore normalization jobs, as well as the change holdings information. And you can also roll back authorities' preferred term correction jobs if you need to. Maybe something happened unexpected that you didn't want. Just to note, there is a limit of 5,000 records for restore jobs. Now, if you have a set that's larger than that, you can open a support case and they'll be really happy to help you with anything above that 5,000 number. So to restore these jobs, what we would do is from the Alma menu, we're going to resources, selecting advanced tools, and then we're looking for the restore jobs. The other option is to manage deleted repository. So this first screenshot we see here, this is the restore job screen. So I could enter in my job ID and then run this to restore. I have an option to also change or excuse me, select whether or not I want to overwrite later changes. And in our manage deleted repository screenshot right here, we can actually, we've got a couple more options if we want to find by titles. We can change our search criteria. So I could search for records that were deleted by a user, or I could use a job ID. But maybe I know it was me and it's just as easy for me to search for my own user and then restore the records that way. All right, so again, anytime you do one of these jobs, we are going to get a confirmation. And it's going to give you kind of a summary of what your numbers are, what you're looking at, so we can make sure it looks good. Just to note, the calculation for the records is often higher in this job because it's including more entities, so it might be including your holdings and your items as well. So here's just a little screenshot. This is what we mean by it might create, it might be counting some different things. It's counting different entities in the logs. We've got MMS and all that stuff. Okay, so it is true that while we can restore some jobs, there are some that don't, like some jobs we cannot actually restore. Now, if you make a mistake, there's sometimes workarounds that we can do. Of course, we're always going to recommend that you try this out in your sandbox first. You know, it's what the sandbox is there for. So dive in, have fun, test everything you can there if possible. We also have, you know, you could prepare for using purged users. We have a best practice document, just to make sure you don't accidentally purge any users you don't want to. And also, we have a wonderful link here to some tips and ideas shared by the community on how to kind of work and do some workarounds to restore information. And of course, we always have analytics. So we can use analytics data, um, and we can pull it from there and repopulate Alma production. So you do have to keep in mind, that analytics data is updated daily. Um, so if you do by chance, run into a situation where you've made a mistake and you need to restore something, you'll want to act quickly and go to analytics before that data is refreshed and then you lose it all again. All right, y'all, we have made it to our last section where we have included some documentation and some other helpful information here. So just some links to sets, or excuse me, link to documentation on sets, running those jobs, and restoring records. We also have some other resources for blogs and articles, for publishing to external systems, looking at deleted records, restoring deleted records. And then, of course, we've added in reference to those cloud apps here as well. All right, Yaala, do we have any questions that we need to review?
Thank you, Amanda. This is perfect. There is a question about deleting users, which
Mm-hmm.
slightly different in nature. If we run a job on an itemized set to add a block,
Mm-hmm.
we find that later on, when we go to that user account, we are forced to toggle their account from external to internal. I would say we need to check it more closely, unless you remember something about it.
No, it does get a little tricky in that area, just because, when you're running a job, you're manipulating those user records in Alma. And so if it are external records, that's where we kind of run into this, that kind of disconnect there, where it gets a little bit tricky. So in that specific instance, I have not looked at something like that in a long time. So I would say open a case with support, to find out best practices in that case. They will likely have more current information than me.
We will check, yes, more closely. Also, if for some reason some users they cannot add processes to normalization rules, we will check that too. I think one person asked about it, so we will check why that user has no access.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
And we just had a request to go back to slide 68.
Oh, sure.
And a couple of questions have come in about finding the links to these. So all of these links are on the PowerPoint, which is currently available on the link that I just put in the chat. We will update it. I think there's been at least one link that came up during the chat today that we'll make sure to add to the PowerPoint. That should be updated by tomorrow. And that's when the recording will be available as well. It should be by end of business tomorrow.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, then on that note, the last thing I will just mention, so I am actually a premium services consultant. That's the team that I work on. So if you're ever finding yourself working in Alma and you might need a little bit more one-on-one kind of collaboration or training, maybe you're looking to do some workflow optimization. My team can help you with that. We can also help with any kind of like hands-on configuration. Maybe you're working on a big project and you could really just use some extra assistance. Please feel free to reach out to us. Our email is premium.services@exlibrisgroup.com, and we'd be happy to talk to you about what your options are. So on that note, I will thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Yaala. Thank you to Ray for managing this session. And thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Yaala.